The Welsh village of Bedow embodied tranquility, a place where residents lived quietly and everyone knew their neighbors. Yet in November 2015, that serenity shattered. When human remains were uncovered in the communal garden of a block of flats, shock rippled through the tight-knit community, turning this peaceful hamlet into the epicenter of a dark investigation. Rumors circulated rapidly as locals grappled with an unsettling question. How had something so sinister remained concealed in plain sight for nearly 2 decades? In November 2015, Michelle James and her friend Rian Lee ventured into the communal garden at Trem YCWM Flats, planning to retrieve what they believed was a discarded medical skeleton. Their neighbor, Lee Sabine, who had died of cancer the previous month, had often joked about owning such a skeleton from her nursing days. The two women thought it would make the perfect prop for a practical joke on another neighbor. As they cut through the layers of wrapping with kitchen knives, a foul odor escaped and black sludge began pouring out, covering their hands. Their amusement vanished instantly, replaced by horrified recognition. This was no prank. These were genuine human remains. Within moments, authorities were contacted. Lee Sabine had died in October 2015 at age 74, succumbing to brain cancer. She had lived as an enigma to those around her, an unconventional woman who frequently shared elaborate yet dubious stories about her past. Mary West, a local teacher who befriended her, characterized Lee as someone both flamboyant and secretive. Rarely seen without a cigarette in one hand and a glass of wine in the other. She wore peroxide blonde hair, red lipstick, and attention-grabbing outfits. Yet, despite her theatrical personality, she maintained emotional distance, divulging minimal personal information. Neighbors found themselves fascinated by her distinctive voice, noting what seemed like traces of a New Zealand accent. Her flat contained virtually no family photographs, save for one vintage black and white picture showing her performing as a vocalist in an Australian nightclub. Lee provided contradictory narratives about her history. To certain individuals, she spoke of escaping an abusive and unfaithful spouse who had left her for another woman. To others, she claimed he had died years earlier of an illness. The reality painted a far darker picture. Lee and John Sabine had married in 1960, ultimately becoming parents to 5 children, though their union began controversially. They first met in a London hospital when Lee was just 17, and John, an accountant and Korean War veteran, was 29 and already married with 2 children. After Lee became pregnant, John's first wife threw him out, and the pair began their life together. In 1969, John and Lee Sabine left their 5 children at a daycare center in Auckland, New Zealand, assuring staff they would return later that day. They never did. The children, ranging in age from 2 to 11, were thrust into a decade of upheaval, shuttled between foster homes and exposed to instability, mistreatment, and the deep emotional wound of abandonment that would follow them into adulthood. While their children struggled through this traumatic chapter, John and Lee had already moved to Australia, where Lee pursued her aspirations of becoming a cabaret performer, leaving behind the profound consequences of their disappearance. The case drew widespread media attention across New Zealand. When John and Lee Sabine resurfaced in the early 1980s, publicly expressing a desire to reunite with their children, it briefly reignited hope. Lee told the Auckland Star that they had traveled to Australia on what was supposed to be a 4-week singing contract, intending to earn enough money for a house deposit. According to her, the agent failed to recognize their agreement, leaving them stranded with only $20. But her story quickly unraveled. Acquaintances from the early 1970s came forward to reveal that the Sabines had, in fact, been living in New Zealand under assumed names during the period they claimed to be trapped in Australia, contradicting Lee's account entirely. In July 1984, the family was briefly reunited. The older children, Stephen, Martin, and Susan, reportedly accepted their parents' return more quickly, while the younger two, Jane and Leanne, struggled with the reunion. But when Jane challenged her mother about the original abandonment and spoke to the media about their suffering, Lee became furious. By late 1984, the parents once again abandoned their children, this time fleeing to the United Kingdom with only their eldest son, Martin. The couple arrived in the UK around 1985 and eventually settled in Bedow in February 1997. Martin, who had harbored hope that the family might eventually reconcile, came to understand that this hope would remain unfulfilled. Tragically, he took his own life in 2000 at age 35, never having reconnected with his siblings after moving to the UK. It subsequently came to light that Lee was not, as she had consistently maintained, originally from New Zealand. In fact, Lee was Welsh by birth and had survived her own traumatic upbringing, abandoned by her mother and shuffled between family members and state institutions. Many continue to find it bewildering how someone who endured such profound abandonment could inflict similar pain upon her own children. For the Sabine children, the psychological damage from these repeated abandonments cut deep. Lee never offered any explanation to the children for why both she and John had abandoned them, and in her final years, she sent hate-filled letters to them that were discovered unsent among her belongings after her death. In November 2015, a pathologist examined the remains discovered in Wales. The body had been wrapped in over 40 layers of plastic supermarket bags, shopping bags, carpet, and roofing felt. Analysis indicated the remains were those of a male who had died from significant blunt force trauma to the head. The body still wore blue-striped pajamas with a Marks & Spencer label, discontinued by the retailer in 1999. This detail proved crucial, as it meant John had likely died in the late 1990s, far longer ago than initial assessments suggested. Investigators worked to identify the body using dental records and attempting to trace John Sabine, but efforts were complicated by a death certificate that Lee possessed, claiming John had died of illness years earlier. Eventually, DNA testing through John's son from his first marriage positively identified the remains as 67-year-old John Sabine. Lynn Williams, who had cared for Lee during her final illness, made a chilling revelation. Lee constantly mentioned the medical skeleton, repeatedly requesting it be moved. While sharing tea together one afternoon, Lynn joked that she hoped it wasn't actually real. Lee's unsettling response was simply that one could never be certain. Lee also confided to a local hairstylist shortly before her death that people would discuss her after she died, suggesting she might become famous. When asked why, Lee cryptically replied it would be because of the body in the bag. Neighbor Michelle James was initially detained on suspicion of involvement, and recordings showed her profound distress during questioning. However, investigators discovered no evidence connecting her to the crime and promptly released her, clearing her completely. Michelle subsequently endured harassment from village residents who accused her of murder, prompting the council to relocate her. She now lives a more solitary existence, having lost contact with former friends, and has been diagnosed with PTSD resulting from these traumatic circumstances. John Sabine hadn't been seen since shortly after signing the Bedow flat lease in February 1997. He had registered with the local medical practice and was scheduled to collect his regular prescription in April 1997. He never appeared. Lee consistently maintained that he had abandoned her for another woman. During a phone conversation with her daughter Jane in 2000, Lee casually mentioned that John had died, though she provided no additional details. Following John's disappearance, Lee became involved in a turbulent relationship with retired firefighter Derek Ellis, who temporarily resided in her home. Speculation emerged that Ellis had also disappeared suspiciously, but his daughter subsequently confirmed he had died in 2010 from complications of alcoholic liver disease. Investigators found a strand of Lee's hair embedded within the wrapping layers, immediately placing her under direct suspicion. Valerie Chalkley, one of Lee Sabine's acquaintances from when they lived in Reading, reported that during a 1997 telephone conversation, Lee had allegedly confessed to killing John. In an out-of-the-blue call, when Valerie joked that one of them must have killed the other by now, Lee responded that she had killed him, stating she had battered him with a stone frog which was at the side of the bed because he was just driving her mad, getting into bed, crying and weeping every night. However, Chalkley acknowledged uncertainty about whether Lee was being truthful, given her propensity for theatrical and exaggerated statements. The confession became something of a dark inside joke in Chalkley's family. Forensic pathologist Dr. Richard Jones concluded that John Sabine had died from blunt force trauma to the skull. The injuries, combined with Valerie Chalkley's account, matched precisely with a heavy decorative stone frog the couple had kept beside their bed. The distinctive protruding eye and hind leg of the frog corresponded with the fracture patterns on John's skull. The stone frog was located in the home of a neighbor to whom Lee had given belongings before her death. Forensic analysis revealed both Lee's fingerprints and traces of John's blood on the ornament, confirming it as the murder weapon. Dr. Jones additionally observed that the body had been carefully wrapped, resulting in extraordinary preservation through a process of chemical mummification. The exceptional preservation was so complete that toxicology examinations could still determine specifics about John's final hours, indicating he had consumed alcohol prior to death, though not sufficient quantities to exceed legal driving limits. Even when his remains were discovered, John continued to appear on the electoral register as a resident of the property. His pension had also been continuously collected for years following his disappearance. Coroner Andrew Barkley of the Glamorgan Valleys concluded the inquest by declaring a verdict of unlawful killing. He emphasized there was no documented record of domestic violence and no evidence indicating that Lee Sabine had acted in self-defense. He stated that precisely what happened and the circumstances would sadly never totally be known. Detective Chief Inspector Gareth Edwards expressed his view that Lee Sabine probably killed John Sabine and wrapped up his body, with no evidence suggesting anyone else knew of his death. Police believed she may have resented John's remorse about abandoning their children. She carried all her secrets to her grave, never confronting justice for her actions. The Sabine siblings carried deep emotional scars from their turbulent childhood, and the truth surrounding their father's fate only added to that lifelong trauma. As the investigation unfolded, they also discovered two half-siblings from John's earlier marriage, along with a maternal cousin living in Wales, new branches of family they never knew existed, emerging from a past filled with loss and unanswered questions. In interviews, daughter Jane expressed that uncovering these previously unknown family connections provided a modest yet significant sense of hope amid the shadows cast by their troubled history. She voiced her longing for a sense of belonging, saying she felt disconnected, still that little girl with the need to know and find where she fits. Son Stephen called his mother a conniving bitch who controlled his father. Though he believed John loved her deeply and was manipulated by an evil woman, Leanne, the youngest, never felt Lee was truly her mother, saying she was simply the woman who gave birth to her. The Sabine children continue to carry the weight of abandonment, betrayal, and loss, proof that the wounds left by one person's secrets can echo through generations. Their story forces us to confront an unsettling truth. Sometimes the people we trust the most are capable of the deepest harm, and the answers we spend a lifetime searching for can emerge only after it's far too late. Cases like this leave us questioning everything. What drives someone to hide a life-shattering secret for decades? Could the signs have been seen sooner? And how do families rebuild when the truth finally surfaces? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Tell me in the comments. What part of this case shocked you the most? Thank you for watching today's story on True Crime Wound. If you found this case gripping, don't forget to subscribe, like, and share this video. Your support helps this channel keep uncovering stories just like this one.